small and supply chain actors. So a bit of housekeeping before we begin. Yes, we will share all of the slides that you'll see today, so you will have those for a resource after today's meeting. If you do have questions, since this is a webinar style meeting, you can put all of your questions into the Q&A box, but we also encourage you to interact with each other, introduce yourself in the chat box, in the chat feature. So please do that throughout the presentation. If you do have a specific question, please drop it into the Q&A box just so that we can identify that right away. And as always, we invite you to stay connected with us after this. This is just the sharing of a specific report, but there's lots that we can continue to connect around within our Food Hub work. So please do stay connected with us after, and we'll share some ways for you to do that after the presentations. Now, before we dive into the content, I do want to start by just sharing all of the wonderful speakers that are going to be joining us today, and also acknowledge our Executive Director, Alba Velasquez, who had planned to join us but is away in Chicago. She was actually invited to be a speaker at the Grocery Retail for All Summit. So she is representing LAFPC in the Midwest today, and sends her apologies for not being able to join. But we are still really excited to share our speakers that are here with us today. Natasha Wasim, who serves as our Senior Food Systems Analyst here at Los Angeles Food Policy Council. And Natasha is a food equity researcher with extensive research experience across both public and private sectors. She's currently pursuing her fourth degree in public health with a master's from Yale. She focuses on food insecurity solutions at USC and served as program manager of the LA County Food Equity Roundtable, where she played a key role in developing a strategic plan recognized at the 2022 White House Conference. She has also worked on SB 1383 as an environmental specialist in Riverside County and as an environmental data associate at Disney, supporting sustainability goals. Natasha is committed to advancing equitable food systems in public health. Thank you for joining, Natasha. And we also have Alicia Badorf, who brings over 10 years of sustainable agriculture and regional food system experience to her position as Sustainable Supply Chain Coordinator at UC Sarah. Her research broadly aims to support farmers and ranchers in adopting more sustainable agricultural practices and assist communities in building equitable and healthy regional food systems. Alicia has experience with farms and food hubs, including educational program development, farming, and the management of sales, CSA programs, and marketing. With the Community Alliance with Family Farmers, she advised small-scale farmers finding right fit technologies to expand their marketing opportunities. She holds a dual bachelor's degree in sociology and French studies from the University of Delaware and a master's degree in community development from UC Davis. Thank you for joining us, Alicia. And we also have Taylor Clark. Taylor Clark served as business consultant on this particular report, and she began her career managing a small farm. She has over 8 years of experience in agriculture, food retail, and food system sectors, collaborating directly with farmers, small food businesses, government agencies, philanthropic groups, and regional food access groups to expand healthy food access and drive more sustainable food systems. This has included strategic planning and business plan development, fundraising and grant writing efforts, and project management for large-scale community programs, focusing the majority of her work on small food businesses and small to mid-sized producers. Additionally, in her roles across various food organizations across the nation, she has been able to connect and cultivate funding opportunities, as well as facilitate connections with stakeholders to support community-focused food systems projects, including state and federally funded nutrition incentive programs. So thank you all for joining. You can tell by those resumes and bios that they were such wonderful contributors to this report, and we're excited to hear more from them a little bit later. We also want to take an opportunity to recognize and thank key partners that contributed to the development of this study. We would like to acknowledge our academic and technical advisor, Sharon Check with the Urban and Environmental Policy Institute at Occidental College, as well as our Food Hub Study Review Committee, Ali Frazzini with LA County Chief Sustainability, Christina Harrington with California Department of Food and Agriculture, Claire Tauber, who's with Community Alliance with Family Farmers, John Polly from the Center for Good Food Purchasing, and Sharon Check from Urban and Environmental Policy Institute at Occidental College. Thank you very much to those technical advisors and review committee, which helped to inform and guide the outcomes that you see in this report. So as I mentioned, my name is Annalicia Carr. I'm the Director of Policy and Coalitions with the Los Angeles Food Policy Council. I'm going to start by grounding us a bit just in LA Food Policy Council's work and our connections to food hubs. So I'll start by reviewing just our mission. Many of you are familiar with this, but in case we have any folks who are new to our work, the mission of LA Food Policy Council is really to ensure that food is healthy, affordable, accessible, sustainable, and fair for all across Los Angeles. We do that by working at the intersection of food and nutrition security, economic development, and environmental sustainability. And we do this by using both policy and programmatic tools, technical assistance, and capacity building all across different food system initiatives. In addition to being a food policy council, we are also a collective impact organization. And more specifically, we serve as a backbone entity for collective impact of hundreds of different food system stakeholders. This includes everything from small businesses to producers to our government partners to philanthropic partners to community-based organizations, food recovery organizations, a whole wealth of stakeholders that touch our food system. And we aim to really cultivate, coordinate, and catalyze opportunities, partnerships, collaborations, and work across the food system through this collective impact approach, ensuring that we all are working with the same shared vision and that we have aligned strategies and goals that we're working towards as a collective. Now, food hubs, of course, are one of those central components that we know contribute greatly to strengthening our regional food system. We know that food hubs can serve as aggregation points, as processing, as distribution, and can help get locally produced foods into our LA communities. We know that these can also be a really key tool in supporting emerging and small urban farmers. This can help with stabilizing their market opportunities, improving pricing, shared infrastructure, and more. And of course, we know this can also help advance one of our core pillars around improving food and nutrition security, ensuring that local, high quality, culturally appropriate food makes it into the houses that we are most concerned about, ensuring food and nutrition security for all. Now, hub-based ecosystems within Los Angeles and in our food system are certainly nothing new. And we really want to acknowledge the diverse ecosystem of organizations that exist across Los Angeles, from businesses and entities and individuals who are already growing, aggregating, recovering, distributing, and selling food across Los Angeles to feed our communities. So these approaches often use a hub-based approach, and all of these approaches are essential and important to our local food system. But for the purposes of our study, we did have to focus in on one particular aspect. So we are focused on strengthening economic activity and opportunity through market-based supply chains that support urban producers. So you're going to hear a lot about the economic development component and the contributions of food hubs, and we'll have an opportunity to hear more about the specific definition that we used for the purposes of our study a little bit later. Now, the goals for this food hub work, we ideally were aiming to better understand the existing food supply chain landscape in Los Angeles. So we conducted a supply chain analysis to better understand infrastructure gaps and opportunities for improvement. We then wanted to take this information to put into place develop actionable pathways for future implementation. So, LA Food Policy Council is not going to be starting a food hub of our own, but instead, we really wanted to put together the pieces and the foundation that would be necessary for anyone acting upon this within the food system that would help contribute to a better understanding, a shared alignment, and future collaboration opportunities. So, with this report, we're hoping that this is going to be useful for community-based organizations, for small and mid-scale farmers and producers, for small retailers and other institutional buyers, for policymakers and other public agencies, and of course, for philanthropic partners who are looking to invest and catalyze this work. So without further ado, I think I've laid enough of a foundation. I'm now going to pass it over to Alicia Badorf, who's going to give us a statewide perspective on food hubs.
Thank you, Anna Alicia, and thank you for having me, Natasha. It's really great to see this all coming together. I'll just reintroduce myself quickly. I'm Alicia Badorf. I'm the Sustainable Supply Chain Coordinator with the University of California Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program, which is also known as UC SAREP, and that's a program of UC Agriculture and Natural Resources. I'm based in Davis, California, and my programming focuses on values-based supply chains and pathways to market for small-scale farmers and food hubs. For this work, I conduct research, coordinate technical assistance, facilitate network building, and create resources. So I'm going to start by sharing the USDA definition of a food hub, which many of you have probably seen. I was glancing at everyone's names who's here in attendance. So I'll share it anyway. So how USDA defines a food hub is a business or organization that actively manages the aggregation, distribution, and marketing of source-identified food products, primarily from local and regional producers to strengthen their ability to satisfy wholesale, retail, and institutional demand. So while this is one accepted definition, food hubs are diverse in the way they operate and the activities they engage in. In terms of business structure, they can be for-profits, nonprofits, S&B corps, cooperatives, and more. There are farmer-run food hubs, cooperatively owned food hubs that are one program of an umbrella organization, and food hubs that operate independently. Their market channels may vary. They could be wholesale, direct consumer, a hybrid of these, or maybe doing food recovery or charitable giving. Some food hubs have physical locations for aggregation and distribution, while others operate remotely or solely coordinate logistics without any physical infrastructure or a transportation fleet. Others might utilize space for light or value-added processing. One report I want to share, and I can drop it in the chat later, is the National Food Hub Survey report from Michigan State University. And so in this latest 2025 report, they were able to survey 100 food hubs across the country. And they do a nice job of describing like all of the different legal statuses, the activities those food hubs are engaging in, and how the food hubs actually describe themselves. And so I just want to make the point that there's not a one size fit all for food hubs. So I'm going to talk a little bit, like zoom in and talk about the California Food Hub Network. So as part of my position with UC SAREP, I coordinate the California Food Hub Network, which is a learning network to coordinate technical assistance, collaborative learning, and information sharing for and among food hubs in California. The Food Hub Network was started by UC SAREP in 2015, engaging about 6 food hubs, and has grown to engage with about 40 food hubs across California. And a little bit more about the network. The network includes food hub operators and organizations that support food hubs with technical assistance. We've supported food hubs with topics ranging from food safety, organic compliance, and institutional market access. And you can actually go to the next slide. Perfect. And then my role as the Food Hub Network Coordinator is to convene and connect food hubs with each other and coordinate technical assistance targeted to the current needs of those food hubs engaging in the network. Okay, and with the next slide, I'm going to zoom out again and talk a bit about the food hub landscape in California. So as Ana Alicia talked about, food hubs in California play a key role in expanding market access for small to mid-scale farmers and food producers through supporting logistics, infrastructure, and marketing. For small farmers that are looking to scale up to wholesale markets, food hubs often offer a low barrier to entry and may even provide technical assistance in areas like food safety, crop planning, post-harvest, with things like pack sizes and quality standards. And as mentioned earlier, food hubs in California are growing in numbers. According to data that we collected at UC Syrup, the number of food hubs in California grew from about 20 in 2017 to over 40 in 2026, and this represents a 100% increase. We saw the emergence of many food hubs during the COVID-19 pandemic, and they were acting as coordinators of emergency food assistance and distribution during that time. And this work has continued through the Local Food Purchasing Assistance Program, or LFPA, which creates contracts between food hubs and their local food banks. Um, the state of California is also investing in food hubs through grant programs like the Farm to Community Food Hubs program, the Farm to School Incubator program, and Regional Food Systems Infrastructure program. So folks from the LA Food Policy Council are going to speak more about their Los Angeles Food Hub study, and I'm going to transition to them by sharing some important points about local resource or research. So first being that this kind of like locally grounded research addresses the diverse needs of food hubs and the local communities they serve. As mentioned earlier, food hubs are diverse and their work is often community-based. It's important to understand local needs when doing food systems work. Local research also takes into consideration existing food hubs, infrastructure, both physical and social, available markets, and the needs of local farmers and producers. Lastly, it can inform state and local investments by surfacing needs and potential impacts, and research and data can play a role in informing state and local policy priorities. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Natasha. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alicia, for your time and support throughout this project. And thanks for Annalicia for also just setting up our goals as an organization for the region to help support better access to food. Again, I'm Natasha. I'm a senior food systems analyst with the LA Food Policy Council. I'm really excited to present this data about community voices and the case for LA food hubs. This is organized within the Food Hub study as the part one for the report, really considering how do we connect with local producers and buyers and community stakeholders who are really involved in our food system, and how do we help translate those voices and surveys and findings into parts that can help relay recommendations or future values for food hubs for the region too. So we'll go ahead and get started. I did kind of want to lay out the plan of how we collected data for actually the past 2 years, really focused on Food Hub work within this region. As Annalisa mentioned, we had a wonderful, wonderful technical advisor, Sharon from Occidental, who also helped lead a lot of the USDA Southwest Regional Food Business Center work for the Los Angeles region. So we had a really great working relationship with Sharon, who had been collecting and been surveying with different partners who are a part of the Southwest Regional Food Business Centers. So we had about 59 surveys that we collected related to that work, all across supply chain interests, how they are part of the food system, even their own pathways and how they purchase or sell items as well. We at LAFPC, we helped organize 4 different focus groups. So we had 2 focus groups focused on producers, whether they were emerging or more ingrained into our food system, but really focused on how do they help kind of create produce and different aspect points within our food system. And then we also had 2 focus groups focused on buyers as well, so we could help kind of translate some of the producer findings to the buyers and help kind of of work out some of those challenges and barriers that they have mentioned throughout the work as well. We also have wonderful partner spotlights. These are organizations and individuals that we work with on a daily basis that we'd love to help highlight in the report. And I did want to give a special thank you to all of them. You'll see in a few slides a few of those spotlights. And in case anything sparks your interest, please, I invite you to check it out in our report and read more about the wonderful work that's happening across LA. And then also we have some partners who are working across the state too. And then the second part, which Taylor will help kind of lead a bit more of the conversation on, is our feasibility and strategic assessment, as well as the Food Hub advisory team, who did a really great job at making sure that the findings, recommendations, strategic assessment, and more really are ingrained in practice and not just thinking about how do we take the data from one step to the next, but really how do we kind of move this forward to help build in more of these conversations as well. So I'd like to just start off with a few spotlights and a few points that I thought were really interesting from our survey findings. So just highlighting our producers here. So the population that we heard from, so there were respondents represented a wide range of roles across our regional food system. About 44% were community-based organizations, 37% were farmers, ranchers, and producers, and there was a little bit more of a distribution across other organizations like farmers markets, distributors, food hubs, businesses, and local food makers as well. There was an interesting question asking about land ownerships, specifically amongst farm respondents, and the findings, at least in Los Angeles, really showed that 58% didn't own their land. So those are individuals maybe on a short-term or a long-term lease. 37% own the land, and then 5% own some land. And just a small plug, our LAFPC's LA Food Policy Council's Cultivating Farmers team, we're actually putting out a white paper really focused on land access specifically and what that looks like in Los Angeles, and that'll be published in the fall. Also, in terms of producers, we also wanted to understand the products that they are often selling. So, producers and food businesses reported a wide variety of products that they sell, with most at vegetables, fruits, herbs, 48% at eggs, and there is a really interesting distribution across other types of products as well, whether that meant with dairy, poultry, seafood and aquaculture, honey, tree nuts, and more. So the distribution there was pretty interesting to see what type of items are, what type of products are being reflected within our food system and how this can actually be translated into something where we can have a shared food hub as well. And we also asked about common sale channels used by farm respondents. So about 50% talked about giveaways, 35% at farm stands, 35% direct sale, and 35% wholesale. So there is definitely a variety of channels used to reach customers, which shows a different innovation and complexities within our LA food system too. Also, specifically, in case anybody's interested in kind of digging deeper into efforts to reach consumers directly, about 30% of them mention community-supported agriculture and 25% mention online or customized farm boxes as well. And in terms of more information about different pathways to help get their products into communities, there were some other important findings talking about how food hubs can help play a role in helping streamlining these efforts, maybe through farmers markets, direct to retailer, as well as other avenues as well. And I did again want to highlight some of the really important work happening within our area, specifically these farm spotlights. We've had a wonderful working relationships with all of these. Many of them were a part of our Food Hub focus groups as well, such as Black Thumb Farm, talking about community-based urban agriculture, Farm to People, really focused on local regional harvests and their approach to fighting hunger. Farmivore, which was a really great partner in explaining and showing us how they have a different approach to local food access. And then lastly, Freedom Farms really focused on local growing, community nutrition within the Los Angeles region. And just to transition over to the buyers, I did want to highlight a few really interesting findings. It was wonderful to connect with this group and really understand their intentions and goals for local food purchasing. So, what we did actually find was that 70% of the buyers within our focus groups were interested in increasing their local food purchasing. Of course, that does come with some type of challenges. So they talked about different barriers to sourcing local food. So 58% of them mentioned that some barriers included pickup and delivery logistics. 50% of them mentioned the high cost of local products, as well as the limited local purchasing options as well. But what we did find that across both groups, both the buyers and the producers, many of them really shared priorities that may resonate with a lot of your organizational goals as well, such as 91% of them mentioning local food access as this top priority for the work that they do. Um, 71% of them focused on racial and food equity, with a equal distribution across others as well. So they mentioned a few top priorities that really resonate with some of the values that we've seen pop up in even other food hub models as well. And we did ask an important question to both groups, asking, do you have any early ideas or hopes for what a future food hub could do in LA? And the responses were pretty interesting here, thinking about how funding and business support should be something top of mind, whether that means we are good at growing food, but not at writing grants or business administration. So that type of technical assistance support could help. Gap certification and other different types of development and aggregation were brought up a few times. Themes under infrastructure and logistics. Many individuals talked about providing a shared processing, packing, and aggregation facility to help support them. Also, staff support popped up as an important part of food hubs as well. And other highlights here, we can talk about schools and institutional markets, maybe also advancing, having the food hub acting as an intermediary to help leverage CDFA farm to school funding. So that can also be an important part within our food system. And then lastly, I think a really common theme that we found in our food hub study report, as well as in many other reports that I've helped review and put together, network and coordination is a huge theme, thinking about how hubs should connect with surplus and coordinate distribution. There should be workshops and networking to help growers collaborate, and also really thinking about what type of model and how many food hubs is something to explore as well. And I also did want to highlight a few partner spotlights that are included into the report. We, again, have a really great relationship, and we were part of the Southwest Regional Food Business Centers, at least in the Los Angeles partner portion. So we have Tracy, who helped write about the strengthening of the regional food systems and the Regional Food Business Center model. Our partners at LA Food Collective and how their work helps supports local food systems. And of course, you heard from Alicia really talking about the California Food Hub Network, but I invite you to check out these spotlights in case you'd like to learn more about what's happening at a larger scale as well. And lastly, to kind of just summarize the important parts and the data collection and how we wanted to use that community-informed data to help create recommendations, we've put together a list of different types of values and recommendations under each of these main themes. The goal is to really figure out how a food hub could help advance food access and healthy consumption within our food system, but also really build something that is community informed. It is empowering local farmers. We think about also community power, shared governance, also important values that popped up through this work is through environmental sustainability and food systems resilience, as well as equity inclusion, farmer empowerment through fair markets, and more. So I definitely would encourage you to check out some of those recommendations, really highlighting how this work can help kind of push forward some of those recommendations in this space. So we think about our food system as a systems change as well. And then with that, I won't take up any more time and I'll pass it over to Taylor, who is our business consultant and helped lead a lot of that part two of the Food Hub study report.
Awesome. Thanks, Natasha. I feel like, you all really set the tone well. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this project. I am actually a former LA Food Policy Council staff member and a Southern California native. So this project was really near and dear to my heart. But building off of what Natasha shared, she and the team at LAFPC really did an incredible job of doing community-led research. And then it was my task to take all of that research and those values and those goals and thinking about what would it look like to have a business model that could turn those values and goals into reality. You can go to the next slide. Perfect. So when I was beginning this research, I came across, oh, sorry, my daughter is waving by. Bye, baby. When I began this research, I came across this USDA report that came out about 10 years ago, and it was examining why 6 food hubs across the country failed. And this was a quote that I pulled from that report. But I really found this so critical because I think, over the last decade, I've heard so much about food hubs in the LA region. And I feel like we have so many wonderful values and goals around this work, but it's really difficult to turn those values into a business model that can actually work and be sustained, not only to support the farmers on one end, but also the consumers who are wanting to have better access to this fresh, locally grown food. If we don't design a model that can sustain the test of time, then both of those groups are going to end up with the short end of the stick in the long haul. So with that, you can go to the next slide. So when I was looking at the research and participating in the focus groups with Natasha and the team, I was just coming back to this question of what are the gaps in Los Angeles and how can a food hub realistically fill in some, not all to the quote on the last slide, but some of those gaps. And so the gaps that you see on the farmers and growers side, this was straight from the community research that the team at the Food Policy Council led. And it really mirrors a lot of what I think Alicia was sharing about infrastructure needs, cold storage and processing equipment, technical assistance around food safety certifications like GAP, reaching new markets, coordinated crop planning, and then with that, the aggregation efforts that might help these small and micro farmers reach wholesale markets. Another thing that came up that was really intriguing from a food hub perspective is the value added opportunities. So how can they extend their season by creating shelf stable products or partially prepared foods? And how can those foods also contribute to more of a revenue opportunity for the farmers? But then on the flip side, I was curious because I've spent a lot of my career working with small urban farmers. And I think a common theme I'd hear from, skeptics of the field, if you will, is how can these small farmers really supply to these huge institutions? And so I wanted to look at what are these institutions wanting? What are they asking from regional producers specifically? And to the point about gaps, I wanted to think about what are the gaps that the large distributors can't necessarily fill? And in particular, I was thinking about, the local and the California grown piece, which some distributors can do, but not all. And then also the transparent ordering process. So to dive in a little deeper there, these were some of the kind of the cost points for the institutions. There are so many huge institutional buyers in Los Angeles that have potential to purchase from this food hub. And so I wanted to look really closely at each of their budgets. And then also if they had any policies that were going to drive local demand. And so what I found was there were groups like the Unified School District and the hospital systems that were spending a good portion of their budgets on local products. So despite, the higher markup cost, they were still willing to invest in that way. But then I also wanted to think about, with just the changing economy, are there policies in place that are going to require or encourage these institutions to continue purchasing with this values-based procurement mindset instead of just purchasing whatever is cheapest? And so these were some of the policies that I found. There was Anchors in Action, Good Food Purchasing Policy, the STARS framework, and the Real Food Challenge that apply to university procurement, and then the Healthy Food in Healthcare. And what I found was that it's truly a lot of the institutions in the city that prescribe to these. It was all the Cal State universities, Occidental, UCLA, USC. Several of our city and county agencies have policies in place to procure locally. And then, as I mentioned, the hospital networks. One thing that I did find particularly interesting with these different policies is there's been somewhat of a shift recently away from strictly locally produced. Sometimes that was still part of the language, but more and more there was a focus on the growing methodology, as in, is it organically grown? Is it regeneratively grown? Are the products more plant based with this overall mindset of climate resilience? And so while we know that food that's grown closer to the end consumer is spending less, in terms of the climate on the gas that it takes to get the food to the end user, and that aspect of how it's contributing to the climate, but they wanted to know more holistically, are the growing practices climate resilient? Are these plant-based foods? And then there was also a focus on community-based economies. And so with that, it was, are we purchasing from small business owners, women-owned spots, BIPOC-owned farms? And so those are just all things that were kind of swirling around in my mind as I was thinking about what would this food hub look like in reality if a food hub were to exist in LA that could meet some of this institutional demand and help some of these institutions meet their procurement goals as well as the farmers' goals. So with this slide, it's really a summary of these two business models that I put together for the team, which I don't believe is in the final report, but I think is maybe coming out sometime in the future was what we had chatted about. But with this, getting back to what I said at the beginning, it's how do all of these beautiful, wonderful ideas and values, how does it look when we turn this into a reality? And so to Natasha's point earlier with some of the case studies that she shared, I think we already have a lot of food hubs in the space that are doing a really good job of reaching our direct to consumer customers. And so that was kind of model 2 on the right side, which I did want to look at because there is direct to consumer demand. And that is really well suited for some of the small and micro farms that LA has. But to the point about the institutional demands and the institutional needs, if they want to fulfill these policies that they have, I also wanted to consider what would a large scale food hub look like in Los Angeles and what would be needed in terms of working capital, operating capital, and just the number of farmers that would have to contribute to that food hub for it to meet the volume needs of its buyers. And so you'll see the box highlighted. This is based upon the Census of Agriculture data that NASS puts out, I think, every 2 or 3 years. And so it was based on what is the volume output and also the annual revenue of small farmers and micro farmers and how that all connects back to the business model itself. And so what I found was a food hub that's the large scale model would need about 30 small farmers or 365 micro farmers to meet this demand. And so you may be asking, well, how many micro farmers are there in LA? And according to the census in 2022, there were 517 micro farms. And so in theory, if a vast majority of these farms were willing to sell into this food hub, then yes, we could meet this volume need and really provide food at the scale that the institutions are looking for. But as you all know, probably not all the micro farms in the area are wanting to sell in this model. as Natasha shared, a lot of them are preferring to sell through free distribution or direct to consumer so that they can feed the people in their very own neighborhood. And so I think this really points to a policy opportunity and an investment opportunity for the region of really investing in our small and micro farmers so that we can grow up their capacity and also encourage more farmers in the area to be able to sell into a food hub of this scale. One of the other things I'll highlight about the large scale food hub that you'll see at the top, and I think this connects to things that both Alicia and Natasha shared, was this food hub accounted for some aggregation coordination. It accounted for food safety support for farmers, helping them to get GAP certified, which is a certification that a lot of our food service companies require to be able to then sell to the institutions. And it accounted for that both in terms of, what would the cost be to operate those programs, what staff are needed, and then it also looked at processing. So for processing, I considered baby carrots as like the model because I found that the Unified School District, their number one local food purchase, according to USDA Farm to School Census, is carrots, which is something that California grows a decent amount of. And so I looked at what would it take to turn these raw carrots into baby carrots for the school district, a more shelf-stable product that could add value to the product overall. So it's really trying to account for all of these pieces that the farmers are asking for, that food hubs might be able to better serve the farmers in the area, but then all coming together to meet the volume needs of these larger buyers that are saying, we want local food, we want regeneratively, organically grown foods, but right now there's a gap of how we can connect with the farmers who can provide those things to us. And so I think there's so many more details I could share about what a real life food hub would look like that meets these needs. I'd really encourage you to read the report that really dives into this in detail. But with that, I'll go ahead and pass it on.
Thank you, Taylor, and thank you, Natasha, and thank you, Alicia. So for this last portion, and we do want to reserve some time for questions. So if you have those, please put them into the Q&A box and keep the engagement going in the chat. It's been great to see. We want to talk about policy implications and next steps. So where do we go from here? So one thing that we heard loud and clear through our Good Food for All agenda process is that food hubs are an important and an essential component of building the food system that we want to see in Los Angeles. You can see we pulled out just some of the food hub mentions within the Good Food for All agenda. This broad report that we're looking at as a charter for the region, guiding work across food systems over the next 10 years. So you can see food hubs and local supply chain activity got its own theme within one of the sections. And you can see there's some of the recommendations that we synthesized from our partners. So that included being able to link local supply chains to retail, being able to have and invest in regional food hub infrastructure, promote regional food hub and cooperative supply chain models, and economic value and jobs within LA County, and even in connection to our sustainability work in urban agriculture, having it there as a tag for collaboration and coordination, supporting co-ops, collectives, and food hubs. So we know that this is an important area and certainly an area that our partners want to continue to grow and engage on over the next decade. So what are these policy implications that we were able to glean from all of this collection of information that we gathered? You can see there kind of the themes or the buckets of policy implications that we found. One of those was around how could we potentially set local procurement targets so that we actually build this in to something that we're striving for and working towards at the local level. How could we create infrastructure grants and loan programs that are actually going to support some of this work? How can we develop funding mechanisms to support emerging food producers and buyers if they need to upgrade their facilities or to be able to expand their operations? And then being able to encourage fair market pricing policies so that we're ensuring that small and mid-sized producers receive prices that reflect the true production cost and include options like cost plus contracts, minimum price guarantees, and other multi-year agreements. We also heard how can we include food hubs in local land use and climate plans so that this becomes an actual point of collaboration, not just within these partners, but as an actual city plan or a county plan. And then the last couple, being able to require performance and equity reporting so that we're actually collecting and publishing data on food hub operations. And we have a better transparency around who's participating, the wages, environmental outcomes, and other key pieces of information that could support public investment. And then finally, being able to implement some kind of targeted price subsidy program. So being able to build in grant funding or subsidies that could temporarily address the higher cost for specialty products that can help producers access buyers, stabilize early market demand, and support scaling over time. So within these areas, we see opportunities for public investment. There was a lot of mention around procurement and infrastructure or seed funding, sustainability funding. These are all ways that we see our public sector being able to play a role, whether through direct investment, shared utilization of infrastructure like warehouses or other assets like that. And of course, opportunities to continue to provide technical assistance and shared resources as we're building out this ecosystem. Now, for future plans, we of course have this feasibility assessment, which kind of gives us a foundation with which to start building. We can also continue to deepen engagement. Collaboration and networks are something that continue to be a focal point, even as our food hub activity grows within Los Angeles. How can we ensure that those hubs are working in a coordinated network-based fashion? How can we continue to analyze the operations that happen, looking for improvements in design and governance and the different structure and financial pathways that are really going to ensure long-term viability of food hubs so that we're overcoming some of those problematic areas that we've seen outlined in previous reports, and then continue to be able to strengthen and align this work to our broader region outside of Los Angeles, across the state and beyond. And then, of course, how are we going to look to be able to launch various pilots and initiate new food hubs that want to come into the marketplace? Now, I mentioned at the start, we are hoping that this conversation really allows for a jump-off point for you to continue to stay engaged with us. We have a number of ways that you can do that. We actively engage working group spaces across different areas. So if you are looking to engage within an action-oriented systems change coalition of partners, we encourage you to join one of our working groups. If you're looking for information and resource sharing and just having the latest updates on what's happening, we also publish two different newsletters: our monthly general LA Food Policy Council newsletter, which includes things from across our organization, and also a more urban ag focused newsletter that also comes out on a monthly basis. Continue to look for collaborative spaces that are focused on food hubs, share those opportunities with us and with others, and continue to engage cross-sector stakeholders that are going to advance our overall goal around the good food for all agenda. So I hope you had a chance to scan the QR code, but we can also send the slides out where you can scan it there. And then thank you, Anna, for dropping the link for our website in the chat where you can also find a lot of these resources. So we are like to end by saying a special thank you to the many individuals who attended our focus groups, who really provided rich and robust information and insight that helped to contribute to this particular report. So those folks that participated in the producer focus group, you can see there, as well as those who participated in the buyer focus group. So thank you all for taking the time and contributing your expertise and perspectives and really helping to inform this final report. And of course, thank you for your time today, for joining us, for your interest in working on food hubs. And I think now we're going to open it up for questions in case there's anything that we can address now. And then, of course, if anything comes up to you afterwards, we're always available to answer questions after the webinar.
Awesome, and I'll be helping to help moderate the questions. We do have one question direct message to me to ask to Alicia. Alicia, have you seen any innovative food hub models emerge in California that could be replicated elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer. Like, what does innovative mean? I think, like I highlighted in my presentation, there are so many different types of food hubs. One thing that I've been hearing about more lately is the need for more like small scale processing capabilities. And so I'm always interested when there's a food hub that has a creative solution for that. It kind of presents a whole other ballgame than when you have a warehouse where you're maybe aggregating and distributing. So I have heard about food hubs that have like partnerships with maybe commercial kitchens, and so they're able to use that space for minimal processing, sometimes value added. And there are some food hubs that received grants, and written into those grants are plans for creating their own processing kitchens or facilities. So I'm excited to hear more about that, but I think it's a huge need, and I think it's something that could also provide access from food hubs to sell more to institutions and like K through 12 who need like processed things like butternut squash or tomatoes and things like that. So yeah, my head goes to processing, but there are so many different models out there, so it's hard to say like what is the one innovative food hub in California.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And then I also got a message, question for Taylor here. What services do food hubs provide that individual farmers often can't do on their own?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think piggybacking off of what Alicia just shared for this feasibility study, I was thinking of all institutional providers, but had the school district in mind, mainly because they're such a huge provider of food for people across the board. So it might be someone of a higher income bracket that's accessing food from a hospital or from a university, but the schools are really feeding the youth of the community across the board, regardless of income. And so to what Alicia shared, I think it is that processing component where the processing infrastructure, both where it's housed, the equipment itself, the ongoing maintenance of that equipment, that's all really expensive for a singular farm to take on. But if there were a group of producers that all decided upon a couple pieces of equipment that would be useful to them or a commercial kitchen like Alicia shared, I think it would lower the operating costs for those individual farmers and then also uniquely meet a need for one of the local institutions. So that's one of the first things that comes to mind. I think some of the more minute services are things like grant writing and kind of that business operational support, where I'm picturing that maybe there's one or two technical assistance providers at the food hub whose job it is to solely help farmers with what they need. And then also with the GAP certification, which is good agricultural practices. If you're not familiar, universities and other institutions typically have to buy all of their food through a food service provider. And so the farmer or the food hub has to have a working relationship with the food service provider. It's not frequent that you can sell directly to, the university or whatever else it is. And the food service provider, because of their own liability, they have to work with farmers or producers like a food hub that have these food safety certifications. And so with GAP, it's interesting because there's a program called Group GAP where a group of farmers can get together and earn the certification together, and it's a bit of a lower lift, or the food hub can take on all that comes with that certification, and again alleviate that burden for the farmers, but it would be better done as a group than if the farmer took it on individually. It's a big paperwork lift, and then there's like an annual fee for that certification as well.
Great. Thanks for that, Taylor. And I do have a question for Annalicia. So what role should local government, schools, and healthcare systems play in strengthening the food hub ecosystem?
That's a great question. So, in terms of local government or even school systems, I think one thing that we think about often is just access to infrastructure. Being able to be one of those things that could there be an opportunity if a local government has a warehouse or another physical structure that they may have, but they're not currently using that could be suitable for something like this? Could that potentially be a multi-year lease that could be used as the food hub space? Do they have any land where there could be something like that built? Things like that where there could be an analysis of like existing resources that they currently have as an opportunity, but there's also the opportunity to invest in and establish those contracts with the food hub when they start to operate. Even being able to be open to if they do have very large contracts, could they think about breaking that up into smaller pieces to make it more accessible for smaller producers? So thinking innovatively about, how they can break up their procurement, which might exclude a lot of small urban farmers, are some of the things that come to mind. Um, in addition to, could there be some local investment into a subsidy program of nature that we talked about earlier? So it addresses that high cost initially as people are starting to get established. So thinking about those opportunities to invest with existing assets and infrastructure that they may already have, be open to thinking about their contracts a little bit differently to create and open up more pathways for urban growers or for food hubs. And then also being able to think about what dollars do they actually have to invest in to create and subsidize, especially for entry points, as we're starting to get food hubs situated in Los Angeles.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. I know we're pretty much at time, and I see a few more questions in the Q&A, so I'll go ahead and follow up with any individuals, but I'll pass it back to Annalicia to maybe close us off and answer any of these questions live right now too.
Sure. Thank you all for joining. And I will just say to the question about, looking at urban versus rural, we really wanted this food hub analysis to be centered on supporting local LA urban producers, which we thought makes this report a little bit unique because we are really trying to focus on urban producers in particular. So while current food hubs might be sourcing from across the food shed, we really wanted to look at within LA County proper, which we know are certainly smaller and urban. So with that, we are right at 1 o'clock and we will follow up with responses to each of the remaining questions that we have in the chat. We want to thank you again for taking the time to join us, and another special thank you to all of our speakers, Taylor, Alicia, and Natasha, for joining us. And we look forward to connecting with you all again soon. Thank you for joining, everybody.